What's up, guys? Welcome back. We are 2 weeks away from the start of the MLB season in 2021. I'm pretty pumped. I hope you are too. And so that means the majority of the teams, or all the teams, are finalizing their roster or on their way towards finalizing their roster. And the majority of free agents have signed. There were some big blockbuster trades this offseason. There's still a couple of guys out there that are available that might be impactful, like on the offensive side. I'm looking at my notes here. Edwin Encarnacion, but he's 38 or 39 years old, but he's still serviceable as a DH maybe. Yoenis Cespedes, I think he's coming back from, I don't know, another horse injury or something like that. He's just on his way back from and doing a showcase to see that he can still play. And I know he opted out for COVID this past year, and then Yasiel Puig, who's only 30, but he still has some pop in his bat. He's got a cannon for an arm, even though he's been some drama. He's surrounded by drama in some places. He could still be an impact player, in my opinion. On the pitching side, you got Rick Porcello still out there, Cole Hamels still out there, Shane Green, who could be an impact reliever, Roberto Osuna, who can be an impact reliever, and David Robertson, who can still be an impact reliever. I mean, he's already shown to be in good shape, and he's never really, kind of deviates from good fitness anyway, so he's always a dependable guy. So those guys are still out there, haven't been signed yet. We'll see who'll bring them in, but today I want to rank all the teams offseason. I want to give you my grades, and I'll go over the moves that they made. And then you let me know, give me your feedback and your opinions, whether you agree or disagree. Put them in the comments down below. Give me your insights. If this is your first time to the channel and you like stuff like this, welcome. And please hit that subscribe button if you want to watch a lot of good baseball content. Okay, even if you don't plan on watching all my videos, hitting the subscribe button is still greatly helpful and really, really greatly appreciated too. I'm trying to get to 2,500 subs in the next couple months, so your help is appreciated. But if you do want to watch more videos, hit that notification so you don't miss the next ones. And always look in the description down below. I always attach some of my most recent ones. But thanks for coming and thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. Let's get to the grades, huh? Put the school hat on. Okay, we'll do the PTA meeting. All right, National League East. Okay, let's start with the Philadelphia Phillies. They brought back Didi Gregorius. I think was a must. It was a must-do. Particularly, I didn't think they were going to go after these, the shortstop bonanza for next year. I thought they were going to bring in Marcus Semien, in my opinion, but that didn't happen. But Didi's, he was great for them. What can you say? He's a great clubhouse guy. He's a young player. So they did good bringing back Didi. They brought in Matt Moore for starting pitching depth. I'm looking at my baseball book here. Brad Miller for maybe infield or some offensive pop. Tony Watson for the bullpen. I think he'll be an effective reliever there, particularly since they had a rough couple of years with their bullpens. Chase Anderson for some starting pitching depth. They brought back JT Realmuto, which was an absolute necessity for them. So Archie Bradley, I think, is one of their more significant signings this offseason. I think he's going to make a significant impact in their bullpen and kind of help stabilize a very inconsistent bullpen over the last couple of years. And trading for Jose Alvarado from the Tampa Bay Rays, it was in a 3-team trade. That's another big bullpen piece, in my opinion. So all in all, they did pretty well. Pretty solid offseason. I give them a B-. Atlanta made a couple impact moves too. Not as many as the Philadelphia Phillies did, but they brought in Charlie Morton, which I think is going to be a significant for them for the starting rotation. He is money in the playoffs. They brought in Drew Smiley for another, starting rotation depth, some more starting rotation depth. They brought back Marcell Ozuna, which they absolutely had to do since they didn't really make any significant offensive expenditures this offseason, but they have that young nucleus. So I think he was very vital to that offense. Jason Kipnis for some infield protection. Excuse me. And Pablo Sandoval. So for some, clutch hitting, more infield depth. Excuse me. Allergies. I also give them B-. New York Mets, to me, they had one of the most significant off seasons in recent memory for me. Kevin Pillar was, I think, a solid signing. Not a flashy move, but he'll give them good outfield depth. Jonathan Villar, another not sexy move, but I think his versatility gives them a lot of options. Plays multiple positions, and he's a clutch hitter. And another solid. I think these two they're going to play often, and they're going to be productive for them. Aaron Loup for the bullpen was a significant move. Trevor May was another significant move for the bullpen. I think both of these guys are going to help the more inconsistent guys like Dellin Betances and Edwin Diaz get better. Okay? They need more consistency in the bullpen. The blockbuster trade of the year was Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. That was a huge one. Lindor is going to be a mainstay for them for a decade. And Carrasco, unfortunately, Carlos Carrasco just suffered a torn hamstring. That stinks. But I couldn't foresee that. I don't think any of us can. So that's not going to affect the grade I give them. And when he comes back, I think he'll be fine. But they're going to be willing to withstand that loss because they brought back Marcus Stroman. They added Taijuan Walker. You got Noah Syndergaard coming back. They have one of the best pitchers in the universe in Jacob deGrom. So they're going to be just fine. And you bring in a guy like James McCann, all-star catcher, who's going to really help solidify and handle that bullpen and starting rotation. They're in good shape. I give them an A, hands down. Washington Nationals, they have the three-headed monster in the starting rotation with Max Scherzer, Patrick Corbin, and Steven Strasburg, but they added John Lester to it. I think he'll be a serviceable, solid fourth man. He's got playoff experience. Even though he's older, I still think he'll give him probably 150 innings of serviceable pitching. But on the offensive side, I'm not sure if they did enough. And they did bring in Kyle Schwarber, and they acquired Josh Bell, so both of them can give them some offensive power. But they brought in Alex Avila for catching depth, but aside from that, I thought they were going to make a more significant expenditure on the offensive side. But I give them a C either way. Not too good of a grade, not too bad of a grade. The Miami Marlins, to me, they disappointed me this year. After making the playoffs, even though it was a short season, but they eliminated the Cubs, I thought they were going to maybe be aggressive and maybe make a couple of more moves, this offseason. But they brought in Anthony Bass for the bullpen and Gio Gonzalez for the starting rotation. To me, they get a D-. I will give them an A for hiring the first female general manager in Major League Baseball history. Kudos to you guys for that. That's really, really cool. Let's move over to the NL Central. The Milwaukee Brewers. Pretty solid offseason, too. It's crazy because they could be right there. They could be far away. I have them finishing second this year. Right behind St. Louis Cardinals in that division, but we'll see what happens. They brought in Colton Wong, who I think he'll be an impact player for the infield. They brought in Jackie Bradley Jr., who makes that outfield defense super duper elite. Even though it's relatively light on the bat, they have enough offensive firepower there to not really worry about Jackie Bradley Jr. at the plate. Brett Anderson for starting rotation depth to add to them, to those young stud pitchers. Derek Fisher for some more outfield protection as well, and Daniel Robinson for some infield protection. And they have that young stud, pairing in the bullpen too. All in all, I gave them a B- this offseason. So, St. Louis Cardinals, they didn't make many moves, but they made, to me, the most significant one this whole season in acquiring Nolan Arenado in a trade. Now you have him pairing with Paul Goldschmidt. That's kind of like Ruth and Gehrig-ish pairing. That's a scary duo right there. It really, really is. And I think he's going to make a significant impact in St. Louis now that he's going to I think he's going to break out a little bit and being just in a better place for him and a better fit. He was unhappy in Colorado, so I think he's going to have an impact there. They also brought back Yadi Molina. They had to do that. They brought back Adam Wainwright. They had to do that, and they brought back Jack Flaherty in an arbitration year. So all in all, I give them a B. That Arenado move alone keeps that grade solid. Chicago Cubs, kind of, I think, like they still have some guys there. They have, Bryant. They have that stud shortstop, and Javi Baez, and then they have quite a few stud guys. And they still have a stud catcher, Wilson Contreras. They have Kyle Hendricks as well. So they have some pieces, but I have a feeling they're going to be transitioning towards moving away from some of these guys, but we'll see. I mean, they brought in Ryan Tepera for the bullpen, Jock Peterson, who might replace most of Kyle Schwarber's production. He is money in the playoffs, so if they make it, I wouldn't be surprised if he played well. Jake Marcinek for the outfield. Jake Arrieta is coming back for a reunion with them for the rotation. Andrew Chafin for the bullpen. Trevor Williams for the starting rotation, and Austin Romine for catching depth and protection. Cole Stewart for starting pitching depth as well. So they had a lot of pitching, but all marginal pitching. So, in my opinion, they get a C-. Cincinnati Reds, another disappointing team. They made a lot of, activity these past 2 off seasons, but this year, and they're down Trevor Bauer. So, Sean Doolittle they brought in for the bullpen, and Kyle Farmer for the infield depth. That's it. They get a D. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, this is a team that that's already on the bottom, but I can see them slowly working their way up. They did have two significant trades this offseason. They traded Jamison Tyone and they traded Joe Musgrove, but they got a boatload of prospects in return. So, which could be something good in the near future. But they brought in Todd Frazier, the Todd father, for third base, Dustin Fowler for the outfield, and in the trade with the Yankees, they got Miguel Yajuri, Roansy Contreras, and Cannon Smith, two pitchers and an outfielder. And they got a pretty significant package in return for Joe Musgrove, too. I just don't remember what it was. But David Bednar, relief pitching, and Andy Rodriguez for catching depth. All in all, in my opinion, they get a C. We'll see how the return from these two trades pan out. But they didn't make any upper tier free agency signings this offseason. That's why their grade's not better. Let's move over to the West now. The Los Angeles Dodgers. They're already at the top, World Series champs, and it's really hard for them to get better, but it looks like they might have. And they did bring back Justin Turner to play third base, and I think had they not brought him back, they would have probably had to trade for a Chris Bryant or somebody like that. They brought in Trevor Bauer, added to that ridiculous riches in the starting rotation. Crazy. They brought back Blake Trinan for the bullpen. Tommy Conley, who's going to be more of an option in 2022 because he's recovering from Tommy John. Corey Knebel for the bullpen as well. So they added relief depth, and I think it's coming kind of handy. But with the depth in that starting rotation, some of those younger guys, like Dustin May or Gonsolin or even Urias, can be used in the bullpen. So they're going to be great across the board. They get a B, in my opinion. San Diego Padres, in my opinion, are the only team to have a better offseason than the Mets. And Blake Snell they brought in, Yu Darvish, and Joe Musgrove. And let me tell you something. They got three frontline starting pitchers, and the worst prospect they gave up was their number 3, and got all 3 of those guys. They gave up a lot of depth, but the highest prospect was number 3. That's genius deal making, okay? They brought back Jurickson Profar, too, for the infield. Mark Melanson added to the bullpen. Keone Kela added to the bullpen. Hang Sung Kim from Korea, I think it is, to play second base for multiple positions in the outfield. In the infield, and Victor Caratini for catching depth. They get an A+, period, end of story. They closed they've gotten a lot better, and they're much closer to the Dodgers than a lot of people might think they are. In my opinion, again. Colorado Rockies, they got some prospects back from moving Nolan Arenado. But aside from that, I mean Austin Gomber for the starting rotation, was Elihuis Montero, who's their third base prospect coming from St. Louis, who was their big piece coming back for Arenado. And they brought in Greg Bird, who I loved him when he was when he was with the Yankees. I hope he has a resurgence there. I just saw him hit a walk-off home run the other day in spring training, which was fantastic. And I really do hope that it pans out in Colorado. They still have Trevor Story and a couple, Charlie Blackmon, a couple of the young dynamic players, but they didn't really do much aside from that. And they lost, giving up Arenado, I don't think they got enough back for him, but they get a D+ in my opinion. Arizona Diamondbacks, Tyler Clippard for the bullpen, Asdrubal Cabrera for the infield, and Joaquin Soria for the bullpen. So they added a couple relief pitchers, and aside from that, they didn't do much to complement the lineup and the players that they already have. So they get a C- in my opinion. San Francisco Giants, last but not least, in the West. To me, they had one of the more impactful off seasons just because of where they were and what they've done to add to what they already have. And they're still in my opinion, far away from the Dodgers and the Padres, but I think to me they distinguish themselves as the team. At least going to be in third. Potentially, you never know, they might be for a wild card spot, depending on, well, I don't think there's an expanded playoff, so it'll be harder to do this year, but crazier things have happened. Tommy La Stella, to me, was the key move for them this offseason. He was one of the gem free agents. I was really hoping he would go to the Yankees, but they got him. Jose Alvarez for relief pitching. Kevin Gausman, they had to bring him back, so they did for the starting rotation. Their ace, Aaron Sanchez, they added another starting pitcher there. Jordan Humphreys for the bullpen. Alex Wood for the bullpen, Wood or Ward. Jake McGee for the bullpen. And looks like John Brebbia for the bullpen. So they added a boatload of bullpen depth. And they brought back their ace, and they added Tommy La Stella. They get a B. It's they had a good offseason. So now let's move over to the American League, the West. Okay, Los Angeles Angels. To me, this team drives me nuts because they have the best player in the universe in Mike Trout, and they never seem to do enough to surround him with the guys that can get him to the playoffs on a regular basis. Now I know Albert Pujols is retiring after this year. He's going to have a surefire first ballot Hall of Fame career, and I think the money that they're going to free up from paying him, they could use to get one of those stud shortstops next year. Now I like Carlos Correa or Trevor Story. I know they have Jose Iglesias, but he can be moved. Those guys are a gigantic upgrade from him, so you can move him to another position. Okay, he's a defensive whiz, but if you can get one of those guys, how could you not do it? And really give Trout, and obviously they have to add more pitching too. But they got Dexter Fowler in a trade to add to the offense, to the outfield. Alex Cobb to the rotation. Jose Quintana for the bullpen. Kurt Suzuki for catching depth. Racel Iglesias for the bullpen. Jose Iglesias, who's their shortstop acquisition. So moderate improvements across the board. They get a D in my opinion. I'd like to give them a higher grade, but I just can't right now. Oakland, they acquired Elvis Andrus in a trade for Chris Davis and some other players that were involved too. Mitch Moreland, which I think is a pretty significant signing for them. He's been pretty good last year or two. Trevor Rosenthal, who they lost Liam Hendricks, the best relief pitcher in baseball, so Trevor Rosenthal was as close to him as they were going to get, so they brought him in to replace Liam Hendricks. The best they could do, and it's the best anybody could do. They added Mike Fears too, though. They added Sergio Romo, so they did add some depth pieces for the bullpen, and Yusmeiro Petit also for the bullpen. So they added 4 guys to replace, or 5 guys to replace Liam Hendricks. So hopefully that's enough. They get a B minus in my opinion. Seattle Mariners. They have to. They have some young budding superstars, and I hope I think it was Kyle Davis. I think his name is, and couple in Jared Kelenic. I know he's having an injury right now, suffering an injury. He'll be back though. But they brought in Ken Giles for the bullpen. They brought in James Paxton. They brought back James Paxton for the starting rotation. Chris Flexen for the bullpen, and Kendall Graveman for the bullpen. So they added some bullpen pieces, but they didn't really do much aside from that. So they get a C minus in my book. Houston Astros, I think, had a quietly effective offseason, particularly last week they snuck in and got Jake Odorizzi, and that to me is a pretty significant signing, particularly since when they put, was it Valero or Valdez, I forgot his last name, fractured his finger. They're already down Justin Verlander from Tommy John, and Zach Greinke's on a sharp decline. So bringing in a guy like Jake Odorizzi, who's just a dependable starter, was something that they had to do, and it was a smart move. Steve Cishek for the bullpen. Pedro Baez for the bullpen, former Dodger, power arm. They brought back Michael Brantley, which they needed to do, particularly since they were down George Springer already, moving to the Blue Jays, and Yuli Gurriel for first base. Now, this is the team, a team in my opinion, who can withstand losing George Springer with that lineup that they already have. So they get a B minus. And last but not least, the Texas Rangers. Mike Foltynewicz for the starting rotation. Chris Davis, who they acquired for Elvis Andrus, obviously. And there was a couple of the players involved, too. David Dahl for outfield depth. Nate Lowe, who they got in a trade from Tampa Bay, so it looks like he'll be their first baseman. I thought they were going to do more, honestly, because they have a new stadium. I thought they wanted to make some noise, but they didn't. So they get a D+, in my opinion. Now let's move over to the Central. Cleveland Indians. Eddie Rosario, I think it was an underrated move for them, but I think it'll be impactful. For the outfield, he plays multiple positions. Cesar Hernandez, another versatile infielder. They brought him in too, so 2 good, solid offensive players and defensive players. Andres Jimenez and Ahmed Rosario were the 2 stud infield prospects from the Mets that they got when they shipped off Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco to Queens. So, and they got some other guys too, but that's pretty much what they did this offseason. They get a C. Detroit, I think, quietly got better too. Nothing flashy, but they brought in Nomar Mazara for right field. Jonathan Shoup for infield. Wilson Ramos for catching depth, for catching protection. And yeah, Robbie Grossman, I think, is a significant move for them for the outfield. And the Jose Urena starting pitcher. So I give them a C. I mean, they didn't do too much. They didn't do too little, so they're right on the cusp. But I think they're, with that young Casey Mize and some of these young prospects, pitchers, I think they're slowly climbing their way up. So give them another year or two. I think they'll be pretty solid and competitive. Kansas City Royals, I think, had a nice offseason too, and they're one of the teams that are down, and I think made the most strides upward. Bringing in Jared Dyson for the outfield, Hunter Dozier for the infield. Andrew Benintendi was with their key move. They got him in a trade with the Red Sox. I think that's going to be significant. He's just a young budding star outfielder. They brought back oldies but goodies, Wade Davis and Greg Holland for the bullpen. They brought in Mike Minor for the starting rotation, and even Carlos Santana from the Cleveland Indians. So they took to play first base. They took a guy from a division rival, brought him over to their team, and now they're potentially the team that could surpass Cleveland Indians, or at least be very competitive with them. I still think they're behind the top teams, the Minnesota Twins and the White Sox, so I'm going to talk about now. But the Kansas City Royals, in my opinion, you got to get a B+. So good. They did a good job, and Dayton Moore said they're going to spend now, and they want to be competitive. So good job. The Minnesota Twins, Matt Shoemaker for starting pitching. They're down Jake Odorizzi, so Alex Colomé for the bullpen. Now they have a legit closer that they haven't had for a while. Nelson Cruz, they brought him back. They had to. He's 43 years old, and he's still tearing the cover off the ball. Andrelton Simmons for shortstop. I think he's going to make the all offense up the middle and right across the infield better. And they brought in J.A. Happ for the starting rotation. To me, they get a B. They just incremental moves. I think Colomé will be impactful, but I'm hoping that they brought in enough to offset losing Jake Odorizzi. So, and last but not least, the Chicago White Sox. Liam Hendricks was the key jewel of the offseason. He was the best reliever in baseball. They brought him in there to close the games. They took him away from the team that beat them last offseason, so that was a big one. They brought back Carlos Rodon for the starting rotation depth, and Adam Eaton for lineup and outfield protection. And they also acquired Lance Lynn in a trade with the Texas Rangers. I think that's going to be significant too. So all in all, not a ton of moves in terms of quantity, but the quality of their moves were really good. They get a B+. Last, we're going to move over to the East. Tampa Bay Rays. This is the team that could lose 10 guys and still be competitive. They're crazy, and it's a testament to how they develop players and make just shrewd and under the radar effective moves. They brought in Chaz Rowe for the bullpen, Colin McHugh for the starting rotation, Chris Archer for the starting rotation, Rich Hill for the starting rotation, Garrett Clevenger, who's a relief pitcher that they brought in a trade from Philadelphia, and Michael Wacha for the starting rotation. So they obviously brought in a lot of quantity because Charlie Martin over to the Braves, and that's a big one. And Blake Snell over to the Padres. So they lost their top two starters, so they're trying to maybe offset that with a bunch of depth starters, and hopefully they'll be serviceable enough to keep them competitive. And I think they're going to be competitive with that lineup, and just overall, it's just a good team. They get a B- in my opinion. Boston Red Sox, they brought in Marwin Gonzalez, utility guy, Martin Perez for the starting rotation, Enrique Hernandez for infield depth. They brought in Adam Ottavino in a trade with the Yankees for the bullpen, and Hunter Renfroe in free agency for the outfield. Now, they did lose Andrew Benintendi, and we don't know, how well Chris Sale is going to come back from Tommy John, but all in all, I give them a C. They didn't do enough, too little or too much, but I still see them improving slightly from last season. Baltimore Orioles. Orioles. What are they doing? And they have some of these young guys, Adley Rutschman, some young, top elite prospects, and I hope that they pan out. But I think they're agreeing to terms with Michael Franco. They brought in Freddie Galvis for shortstop, but then Matt Harvey for the rotation of Felix Hernandez. These guys are 10 years past their prime. They're not going to be competitive in the American League East. They get a D- in my opinion. So I hope they stay healthy, but what are you going to do? Toronto, monster offseason. Marcus Semien for shortstop. Smart. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he was going to go to the Phillies. George Springer for center field. Huge move for them. Those two guys alone add a lot to that of offensive firepower and veteran leadership to that lineup. To go with those stud young players. They brought in Steven Matz in a trade for the Mets for depth in the rotation. David Phelps for the bullpen, Tyler Chatwood for the starting rotation, and Kirby Yates for the bullpen. So they added, two to the bullpen and two to the rotation, which will make them a little bit better. They're still down an ace, though, but in my opinion, they get an A. And last but not least, the New York Yankees. To me, they had one of the more effective off seasons too, because Brian Cashman had a limited budget and he had to do a lot with limited resources that were mandated to him. But he did bring in Corey Kluber on a one-year deal for the starting rotation. They acquired Jamison Tyone in a trade, so they have two potential frontline starters for pennies on the dollar, but they got to stay healthy. Darren O'Day and Justin Wilson for the bullpen, which it comes in handy because it's offsetting the loss of Zach Britton right now to elbow surgery, but he'll be back too. DJ LeMahieu was their number one priority. They brought him back on a 6-year deal, thankfully. Jay Bruce and Derek Dietrich under the radar moves, but I think both of them are probably going to make the roster. Good left-handed bats, and it gives them much more versatility, and they're upgrades over some of the guys that they already have on the bench. And even this kid Rob Brantley, who might compete with Kyle Higashioka for a catching position here. Another one is looking good. He has a smooth left-handed swing, and last but not least, Brett Gardner. They brought him back on a one-year deal. His veteran leadership, I think he still looks good, so got to give it to them. But in my opinion, they get an A-. They didn't bring in an ace pitcher. I think they could have probably acquired one in a trade, but still remains they might do it at the deadline. But they get an A-. So those are my grades this offseason. Let me know what you think. Give me your comments and your feedback in the comments down below. And again, hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It's really helpful, and I greatly appreciate it. And I'll talk to you next time. And thanks for watching.